Thank you so much for joining us, Natalia. Sorry, we are joined today by Natalia Theodoridou. Yeah.
Yes. Well done.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Natalia is the author of Sour Cherry here, which is a really amazing book. And it was funny. I was on, just doing my interview prep this morning. I was thinking, like, wow, this book really makes me feel the way I felt first reading 100 Years of Solitude, and then also Carmen Maria Machado, Her Body and Other Parties specifically. And I see now, I didn't even realize this, that Benjamin Percy, who also is one of my favorite authors, oh my gosh, that he said that if you love Kelly Link, Angela Carter, and Carmen Maria Machado, then this is the new author for you. And I think that's so accurate.
So that's high praise.
But it's really it's such a unique novel, and I'm excited to dive into some of these questions. But before we get to the general questions, could you just tell us a little bit about the general background of the book, how this book came to be what it is, and where the original ideas came from?
First of all, thank you for having me. And I have to say that your book club sounds amazing. I'm really curious what will be on the menu. There are some descriptions of really weird food in the book, as well as sour cherries, obviously. So I knew that I wanted sour cherries, retelling of Bluebeard. And it has a contemporary framework. It's basically a story about toxic masculinity, domestic violence, cycles of abuse, all that very cheerful stuff. And I knew that I wanted to tell a story about that, and Bluebeard was just it was perfect for it, because not only is it about a serial wife killer, there's also that extra speculative element in it, the Bluebeard, that's never sufficiently explained. And that allowed me to ask questions about the nature of violence and violent men. Is it natural? Is it unnatural? Does he have a choice? Can he avoid it? And what the role of the environment and society and the patriarchy is in enabling him and creating the monster that he is. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. How long have you been working on this book?
So it is based on a short story that I wrote in 2018 for the Clarion West Writers Workshop. And my instructor of the week that I wrote it was actually Karen Joy Fowler. And she said, I want to know more about Cook. And that's how the novel came to be. Yeah, I wrote the first version after that. Yeah.
Wow. Who'd have thunk it? I would not have thought that this started with Cook, but that's great.
Yeah, it made me ask what kind of woman would, love this man.
Oh, so not original Cook.
Original Cook.
Original Cook. Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
That's fascinating. Okay, so to the questions.
Yeah.
So there's definitely queer undercurrents, or in some case, overcurrents, within the book. How did you decide to weave queerness into a folktale framework that, especially one that might not seem as what's the word, as I guess accepting, for lack of a better word, of that queerness? Like, it seems like a very repressive and oppressive vibe that is just giving off. So weaving that into it, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm queer. I'm surrounded by queers, and I do like to see ourselves in all kinds of stories, including that kind of story. And I think what used to happen is, in the past, a lot of villains were queer coded, and then we swung in completely the opposite direction, and then we could only have perfect representation of queerness, and we had to be role models, completely flawless. So, and I think now we are kind of coming back from that and allowing ourselves to be present in all kinds of stories, being all kinds of people, having all kinds of relationships. I mean, queer people can be victims, they can be survivors, they can also be perpetrators. And if we're not allowed that in stories, I think that kind of limits the spectrum of humanity we can inhabit. I want us to be there as the complex and fully fallible people that we are. So in fairy tales as well as realistic stories.
Interesting. Did you feel any kind of was it how was it to step away from that kind of traditional responsibility to like responsibility? Not that anybody actually has a responsibility to portray their identity group as one sort of way or another, but as you said, like the pendulum has kind of swung in both directions of villains and heroes, and that this book is so shows the full breadth of humanity. But I know I've been speaking with other authors there have often been that that weight of trying not to give anybody an excuse to scapegoat anybody based on their book. Was that like a freeing experience, or was there any kind of trepidation or hesitation with that?
I've been writing for quite some time, and I used to be scared of the kinds of representation I could include in my books, not only for fear of queer people being scapegoated, but also for fear of offending people within my own community, which does happen. But in the end, I realized that people who want to scapegoat queer people will do so regardless of what's in the book. And the bad faith readers will read in bad faith. So I realized that I was writing defensively, and I don't want to do that anymore. So it has been very liberating. Now I'm writing for the best faith reader, the people who need exactly the kind of story I'm telling. That's who I'm writing for. It's not for everyone. I know that, and that's fine. It can't be for everyone.
I'm very glad to hear that. Because it can be very. I mean, it's fraught, and that's so exciting for you. I mean, and it's also it's very difficult to do. You have to get out of your own way in so many ways, and you've done it beautifully. Like this is, I haven't there. Some of the lines I would just have to stop and go back and like chew on them because they were so evocative and just like got down to the core of the meaning of it. I'm struggling to remember to give an example right now, but it happened several times. And one of those is the scene with the coal, with walking on coal. How did that come into the story, and how does that kind of that burning ember factor as a metaphor for their relationship and for his life?
I really love this question because it just shows me how differently people can get into the book and how many different things they can get out of the book. And I want to preface this with saying that I don't want to close down the meaning of the book too much. I basically want to absolve myself of authorial responsibility. What I say doesn't necessarily go. But for me, the walking on coals, first of all, it comes from a real custom that happens in northern Greece, where I'm from, and in southern Bulgaria. People walk on coals on the day we celebrate Saint Constantinos and Saint Eleni. And the people who walk on coals, they call them anastenarides, which means the people who sigh. It's the sighers, because they walk on coals and sigh. And it's basically an ecstatic dance performance kind of thing. They go into trance. And there are two interpretations, I guess, of why it works the way it does. Some people say that they don't get burned because they have faith. And the other explanation is that because they go into trance, they dissociate, so they don't feel the pain. And that's how they can walk on coals. And I think both of these versions speak to a lot of the themes in the book. On one hand, with the dissociation, this idea that the body is negligible, that it doesn't matter, it's a coping mechanism for a lot of people who find themselves in abusive situations, I think. Like the first step being, it doesn't matter, I'm not feeling this, the pain is not real. And the second step is, this is not happening at all. So it's and the other aspect of it is what Holt's cult is doing with the cold walking, basically, which is this messianic idea of self-sacrifice that conveys some kind of self-worth and responsibility to save the world. Through self-destruction and through withstanding pain, you prove that you are worthy of saving the world. And this is where I think Holt's ideas and Tristan's ideas intersect, because Tristan also has that masculine narrative of heroism, that he is going to save his mother, he is going to save the world, even if it means that he will destroy himself, basically. And yeah, that's where the goals are coming into the story, I think, for me.
That's beautiful. This is a slight, it's tangentially related, but I'm realizing now that that we, and this is not, did Savannah tell you that we have a theme for the year that we pick the books around? Yes, we do. I'm not going to say it on tape because we have a contest for people to guess at the end. But I'm realizing there's a theme between this book and our last month's book. That is not the theme. But there is this idea of saving the world and destroying oneself to save the world. The last book was The Black Hunger by Nicholas Pullen. Have you heard of it?
I haven't read it. No.
It's a queer historical fiction horror.
Sounds amazing. I'm gonna write this down.
It's so good. I loved it. In it there is this Buddhist sect that wants to bring about the end of times, and they do this through resurrecting people to then be like their army of the dead. And there's a lot of cannibalism.
As you do.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also this like beautiful queer love story at the heart of it, which like is, how do these things match together? So that is not this book, but that idea of somebody taking up the mantle of and being a savior and the inherent harm that brings to somebody, I think is a really interesting trope to explore, and not something that I realized these books would share, which is very funny. Okay, speaking of Tristan, Marius, he is the only one who fully sees and believes Tristan. Why him in particular, and what was important in creating a character like that?
Again, I really like that you're asking about him, because not many people pay a lot of attention to Marius. And
that's so sad.
I know.
He's such a schnookums.
So he's, I think he's a boy who sees things a little differently and perceives things that most people don't, and maybe he sees things a little more clearly than other people, and because of that he has been disbelieved a lot, and he has that experience of not having his experience or his perception validated by the people around him. And I think that's what attracts him to Tristan. That's what they share, because he understands what it's like, what the impact of that is, and how lonely it is not to be believed. I think that's what brings them together, and I wanted someone to validate Tristan, to see him fully. Unfortunately, that happens too late for Tristan. I think he's too set on his path already. But it does also, sadly, it is a moment when he could make a different choice. So he still has the choice and the agency to choose something differently, but he doesn't, and he's just set on his path.
I know I sent you a lot of questions, and since it seems like we've had a few different ones that are different than what you've received in the past, I did want to give you the opportunity, if there's like favorite questions or questions you haven't gotten before that you'd like to make sure we get to, I'd be happy to go to those next.
I mean, most of your questions I haven't answered before.
Oh, so really?
Yeah, okay. Wherever you're gonna go, I'll follow.
Well, then let me back up and say, what is the most common question you get and what is the answer to it? Because our group will probably want to know that, and if we didn't include it, I want to make sure we cover that.
Actually, it was where the idea came from. I think that it was the first one you asked, and
that
we
usually
covered
covers
that
all
one.
the bases.
Yeah,
So usually that. What's your writing process like? Because it's always different. Every writer, and it's always interesting. I'd say those are the two most common that we get that people want to know. But anyways, okay, we can go back to our fun question. Okay. I'd like to move to the next section that I sent you about the Lord and power and abuse and the curse. So the Lord's need for love. In his brief reflective moments, the Lord seems to long for connection, and when he's just the boy, also is his curse. Something that you have taken from real folklore, from Greek folklore, or is this more of a manifestation of what his life of entitlement has done to his soul, that it's like rotting?
Again, I really like the way you put that, and the answer is probably both. He does long for connection, I think, and I think some of that comes from his not being he's being rejected by his parents, basically, when he was a little boy, when he didn't get the unconditional and complete and full love that he wanted. So he keeps looking for that in other people. And the problem is that, sure, everybody deserves that, but nobody can actually give that to him, because nobody can love you in the past.
Yeah.
Nobody can give him that reparative experience, and I think that's where he starts to make the mistake of confusing what he should have gotten as a child with what he deserves from people now, no matter what. And that's where the entitlement comes in. And I'm training as a therapist.
Oh,
So
wow.
so I keep thinking about how I would counsel this person. What he needs is to learn how to love himself and accept himself unconditionally. He can't keep looking for that in other people, but that's what he does, and that's why it fails, and that's why he keeps getting into this relationship where he spreads harm. So I think you're spot on. This is the curse, but also you're spot on in both ways. It does come from things in my experience with people who should have been loved as children and ended up being abusive.
And I think it's really it does feel very, very true to form and true to reality, and that there's lots of people go through bad things and don't become that person. And so where finding that kind of pivot point, what was that pivot point? Or anyways, there's lots of different roads we could do down there. At the end, we discover the little trove of hair and dresses. Why such a creepy thing to have and discover? So why dresses? Why hair? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So that's definitely partly trophies, like the usual serial killer kind of trope of keeping something to remind himself from of the relationship, what he lost. But I think it also functions as a kind of self-punishment in a way, because all these things are reminders of all these failed connections and representations of the perpetually postponed longing and the yearning for that connection that eventually he doesn't allow himself to have, because he does have the chance. He could have something close to that with the shopkeeper, right? But he destroyed that because he can't he can't allow himself to have it. Maybe he doesn't even think he deserves it,
Mm-hmm.
and he might be right. I don't know, but the way he responds is by repeating the cycle with more harm, and then all these things accumulate. And yeah, I think it's basically a representation of all of his failed connections and all the chances he had to make it right, and in how many ways he failed to do that.
I don't want to give him.
I'm sorry, this is such a depressing.
No, it's okay. It's okay. But because it is depressing, but like it doesn't. It's strange. It doesn't feel like a sad book. I didn't feel like it was a sad book while I was reading it. I just was.
Okay, good.
Maybe that's just because I was mesmerized by the language, but we'll see what people think. I don't want to give him all of the talk, give him all of our time. I would like to talk about Agnes, and I think that what you just said is a good kind of segue point. One of those possible pivot moments early in his life is with is her name Eunice? Is that right?
Yes. The first wife, yeah.
Yeah. With when they're children, and it says like, oh, you could just like go apologize to her. It didn't occur to him that he could extend sympathy unless he was actually at fault. And that's like almost a pivot moment, but it also, I think, is like a moment where he learns a different kind of manipulation. But bringing back to Agnes, she introduces this concept to him. So can you just talk about Dear Sweet Agnes, why she stays, what kind of, like, she starts the book clearly having gone through a traumatic loss of a child, and seeming to kind of really dissociate from that pretty intensely. So how does she grow, and what was the inspiration behind Agnes?
Agnes, I think the main question I have around Agnes is, how does one love someone like him as a child? Because he's already harmful as a child, right? And I think her deal is that she needs to be needed. And she thinks that if she just loves him well enough, that will save him from himself, basically, and from who he is. But of course, she's wrong, because she cannot save him, and he does have responsibility, and he does have agency, and she cannot control that. But I think that's what keeps her. She says at one point, "We love the children we're given." And I think that would be her answer. What else could she have done?
Yeah. Do you think that is healthy?
No.
I'm honestly kind of
no.
As a mother, I do like, yes, you do, like, and to your point, somebody not receiving love, especially as a small child, can have devastating effects. But to what end do you give somebody your love, really?
Yeah. And I think there's also a difference between accepting someone and colluding with them. And I think that's where Agnes goes wrong. Because you can accept and love without absolving someone of responsibility and becoming complicit in their abuse, which is what Agnes does.
That is a very good point. Yeah. Oh man, that's pretty damning. That's spot on, though. You would know.
Oh, and you also asked why she stays, right? Even though she's free to leave. And I think that is a really, really important thing for all of the women in this book. And I wanna. You said, why does she stay even though she's free? And I wanna question whether she is free. You know, and in what ways is she, and are we all free? Because there are social and class and patriarchal structures around us that kind of limit the breadth of what is available to us as a choice. And I want to always, remain conscious of that when I talk about the women in this book. Yeah. There's more to say about cycles of abuse and trauma. But I don't know if you want to keep talking about trauma.
Let's see if we can. So we have about 6 minutes left in what we said we would the time we would take up of yours. So let me hit a few questions that I think people are going to want to hear about, and then if we have a little bit of extra time, we can absolutely come back to the trauma. Let's talk about the title and the symbol of cherries overall. Can you just talk about why cherries? Why sour cherries?
Mm-hmm. Right. So this is again personal childhood history. In Greece, we have lots of cherry trees. Both my grandparents had cherry trees in their gardens, and one of my grandparents made the kind of we gathered the sour cherries, put them in a bottle with sugar and water, and left it in the sun. And you had to turn it every few days, and eventually you got this thick, syrupy, very sweet kind of thing that you diluted with water, and you made this very red, very sweet drink that you gave to children. So it has those connotations of sweetness, luring children with, rewarding children. And my other grandfather had a cherry tree in the garden that my cousin and I used to climb. And I just remembered this the other day, actually. We played shopkeeper. I don't remember what we sold, but we used the leaves of the cherry tree as currency.
Mm-hmm.
So there is also that connotation of wealth. Yeah, that's what cherries are for me. Pleasure, reward, and wealth, I think.
This is one of the things that the cherries reminded me of when, and this is very, very highbrow comment I'm about to make. But when Agnes is telling Eunice not to eat the cherry tree, not to eat the cherry pits, and she eats it anyway, she talks about, you're going to have a cherry. I just thought of the episode of Rugrats when Chucky eats a watermelon seed, and the babies have to shrink themselves to go retrieve the watermelon seeds so that Chucky does not explode.
Love it.
Don't know if you've seen that episode, but it's I would not recommend trying to watch Rugrats as an adult. I did it once and it was very, very strange. Anyways, one of the other things that I think people would definitely want to talk about are the ghosts and the narrators, not Agnes, the narrator's relationship to the ghosts. I know we had one question of like, and you don't have to answer this, but is the narrator ghost? Is she alive? I personally think she's alive, but that's just me. But I also it's the echoes of the Greek chorus that they occupy, and did that come about naturally? Did you know you wanted to have that classical element within the book, or did it just you knew you wanted to have ghosts and it kind of turned into that?
That's a good question. Do I know the answer to that? I mean, Greek tragedy always makes its way somehow into the things I write. My background is in theater as well, and I am Greek, so how could it not? Yeah. Everything ends up being a Greek chorus in the end, if you just wait long enough. But with ghosts, I do have a fascination with ghosts. I think they are the past making demands on the living, and I think the past is somehow always present in the end, and ghosts are one way that can happen in a story. I think they make demands of memory. They signify the difficulty of letting go, which is not the same as forgetting. They bring home the burdens of the past, the generational trauma, again, the demands of our heredity, all the ways we trap ourselves into the narratives that have been passed down to us from the people who came before. And there is also the intertextuality aspect of it that is also related to the Greek chorus. I think of many things as haunted. Like I think of gender dysphoria as a haunting. I think of spaces, theater as a haunted space. And I think of text as something that is always haunted by all the intertextual references of the author or that the reader brings into the reading and the performance of the text in the reading. I mean, a play itself, I think, is always a kind of haunting because it um, includes both all the versions of the play that you have seen on stage, but also preemptively the all the stagings that will come
Hmm.
later. Um, so yeah, my next one is also about ghosts. I think I
I
might be repeating myself.
No, but I love that interpretation because it also takes away. It's more of like a quantum understanding of human action versus the
Hmm.
idea of something horrific. That
Hmm.
it isn't
Yeah.
inherently horrific. It can just be, like I said, it's very quantum. It's very yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's where the what the book moves towards in the end, right? It's having this chorus of ghosts be not a horror story, but something of a community with camaraderie, and yeah, yeah, I think you're right. Do you
Oh,
want me to answer the question about the narrator or not?
if you want to, if you want to answer it, we'd love to hear. We'd love to know what the intention was.
I mean, again, I don't want to close down the meaning too much, but for me, she is a ghost. She has
Oh,
been
okay, I was
since the
wrong.
beginning. Yeah. No, you were not wrong. You are valid.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That's very sweet to say. Okay, so we're just a little bit over time, so I just want to get to a few standard questions we do like to ask that I realized that we didn't include, but these should be pretty straightforward. The first one is where there are books or different media that you consumed while writing this book that like really informed the creation of this book. And then after that, the question is, what are some books that you would heavily recommend right now, just based on things that you've enjoyed reading, whether or not they have anything to do with Sour Cherry?
Right. Carmen Maria Machado in the Dream House, definitely relevant. Absolutely. Women Talking, also by Miriam Tays. Both the book and the movie, I
I haven't
think,
seen the
can
movie
be.
yet.
I really liked it, and I mean, I only saw it after I had written the book, but I think there is a conversation going on there. Um, Pina Bausch, dance theater, especially her Blaubart, which is just amazing. Bergman's Cries and Whispers, the movie. I listened to a lot of Tarquinio Merulas, who is an Italian Baroque composer. I listened to Canzonetta Spirituale Sopra la Nan, which is very eerie and haunting and wonderful. And in terms of other books, just anything by Vajra Chandrasekhara, wrote The Saint of Bright Doors, Rakes Fall, Ben Pladek's Dryland, amazing books. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Hmm.
Great list. And then just anything that you've really enjoyed recently.
Oh, sorry, that was Vajra
Oh, okay.
and Ben and
Got it.
anything else? Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Okay. Finally, you did mention that you're working on something else with ghosts. Can you tell us anything about your next projects?
Well, the book I'm working on is about the Greek Civil War and the ghosts that haunt a nation. So I move a little bit from the personal to the more political, historical realm of how we construct our national identities. And it is very much about remembering and forgetting and the burden of representation, again, relevant to what we were talking about before. But
Oh,
we'll see when and how that might become an actual book.
okay. Well, we'll keep an eye out for it. I mean,
Mhm.
this book is only a week old, so
Yeah,
well, yeah. How has the first week been?
completely overwhelming.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, but mostly in a good way.
Okay.
I'm probably going to sleep for a week after this, probably.
I'm sure. Well, we'll let you get a jump start on that. Thank you so much for joining us. It's an incredible book. You should be so proud, and I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you so much for having me, and I hope everybody enjoys the book and the dinner.
Yeah, we'll have to be sure to tell you what was on the menu once we get it.
Please do. Yeah, I really want to know. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natalia.
Thank you.